What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Here we are with another reaction. In this one, we have the story of Poland's armed forces in exile, a World War II documentary special. Now, before we dive into this video, if you guys happen to enjoy, please don't forget to smash subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and let's dive right in.
The Polish state was the first nation to fall in this war, but the Polish people are far from defeated. Fired by vengeance and hope of liberation, Polish troops fight for the Allied cause. Whether it's in the skies over Britain, the hills and valleys of Italy, or the mud and blood of the Eastern Front, you can be sure there are Poles there fighting.
Love it, love it, love it, love it.
I'm Indy Nidell. This is a World War II special on the Polish armed forces in exile. I said armed forces, plural, because after the dual invasion of Poland by the Wehrmacht and the Red Army in September 1939, Polish servicemen are scattered across Europe and beyond. After the Soviets invade on September 17th, Polish Commander-in-Chief Marshal Edward Rydz-Śmigły orders his troops to do what many other Poles are doing and save themselves by fleeing to Romania or Hungary. By the summer of 1940, about 70,000 Polish soldiers have made the journey, and many of them are in internment camps. These, though, are apparently quite easy to escape. Franciszek Nedja is one of many who does so when his hosts simply look the other way. On every railway station was the police, checking every train. Before we left camp, we dressed in new civilian clothes, poor and cheap, and we managed to reach Budapest. In Budapest, we had to wait for some documents to cross into Yugoslavia. We crossed the river by boat, and on the other side was a coachman and 2 horses waiting for us to take us to Zagreb. After Yugoslavia, France is his final destination. By April 1940, 45,000 have made it there via land or sea. For many, France is the ultimate destination. Many of them form the core of the new Polish armed force, ready to take the fight to the Germans and win back their homeland. Except their new hosts don't see things quite the same way. Polish Prime Minister in exile Władysław Sikorski gets on well enough with the French, but they aren't keen on military offensives or an independent Polish force.
So they were scared of the Germans. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing. I guess so far that because why you got 45,000 Polish soldiers ready to go fight, ready to go to war with these Germans. That's a big boost to your numbers. But you're probably scared of the Germans is what I'm gonna assume. France. If I'm wrong, I hope I am. We will learn later on in this video. But shout out to these Polish soldiers, right, who made it escape from these these camps pretty easily. It seems like these worker camps, I believe, pretty easily got to where they were trying to go and were ready to fight. Like, yeah, you may have came in and you may have took over our land, but like, don't think we just finna lay down and accept that. No, we're gonna fight. We're gonna defeat you, and we're gonna get our land back.
It goes against their hopes for a negotiated settlement at Poland's expense. Nonetheless, the Polish army in France is growing and growing. The French have allowed Poles who were already living in the country before the outbreak of the war to join the force, although those working in restricted occupations like mining have to stay at their jobs. This means there's a force of about 80,000 Poles when the Germans invade in May 1940. The Battle of France is a complete disaster for the Poles. Well, I mean, it's a complete disaster for all of the Allies, but Polish losses are disproportionately high. The French press the under-equipped and under-trained Poles into the line. Training units like the Polish Armored School and the officer and NCO schools are pushed into frontline combat. The French also take Polish anti-tank companies and artillery for themselves. And when hastily installed French Prime Minister Philippe Pétain asks Germany for an armistice on June 18th, the Poles feel totally betrayed. The next day, Sikorski once again urges all Poles to evacuate, leave the hills of France, and head for the insular safety of Great Britain. Once again, they are on the move. A lot of the men...
Forgive France, man. France weak, bro. They was scared. Although the Germans and Nazis, I will say they were powerful. So it sounds like, but the French, it sounds like the French did the Polish absolutely awful. They put their soldiers on the front lines. They took their artillery. They took the anti-tanks. They did everything. And then all that just to try to come to a deal with the Germans. After all that is absolute insanity. So again, hey, first was the leave Poland. They're coming. Go abroad. Go to Romania. Go to France. A lot of these 80,000 strong in France, but France absolutely betrays them. Absolutely dirty. So hey, go to Great Britain. Hey, we know what they did in Great Britain. We watched what they did in Great Britain against the freaking Germans. And I think I'm gonna love where the rest of this go.
And end up fending for themselves during the dash to the ports. Josef Zakvieja sets off by car. The roads were packed with refugees and pushcarts. After 2 days, we were near to La Rochelle, but the Germans had got there first, so we were diverted to Bordeaux. We went along the southern side of the Gironde to La Verdun, where 4 British ships were waiting. It took more than half a day to get loaded. We were attacked by waves of Stukas. While a few boys got hit by machine gun fire, not a single bomb hit the ships. The nearest thing to a miracle I have ever seen.
Serious?
That was the 23rd of June.
That is insane.
On the 26th of June, we arrived in Liverpool, and on my first night in Britain, I slept on a bench in Liverpool Football Stadium. Next morning, we were put on the train to Scotland. He's one of the lucky ones. Only about a quarter of the Polish forces make it to Britain, about 20,000 men. Most are taken prisoner. Some escape elsewhere, and some even slip away and join the French resistance. The Polish ground forces are formed into the Polish First Corps and guard Scotland against German invasion. Really, they are little more than a division, but the impressive title keeps morale up, and compared to the British Home Guard, the well-trained and experienced Poles are nothing to be sneered at. The Corps will never fight as a single formation, but individual units will be attached to other Allied forces later in the war. Looking ahead a little to 1942, these units will be the 1st Polish Armored Division, 1st Independent Rifle Brigade, 1st Independent Parachute Brigade, and the Training Brigade. The Polish Navy is also in Britain. They actually escaped Poland back in 1939, as we saw in the regular episodes. They have 3 destroyers and 2 submarines, and have seen action in the invasion of Norway and the evacuation from France. They will continue fighting alongside the Royal Navy until the end of the war.
Love
1940 and 1941, though, it's the Polish pilots who steal the show.
Yeah,
they fight in 2 Polish squadrons, 302 Poznanski and 303 Kosciuszko. At the height of the Battle of Britain in September 1940, Polish pilots formed 12% of fighter command strength. 303 Squadron is the highest scoring in the RAF. Head of Fighter Command Hugh Dowding later writes, "Had it not been for the magnificent work of the Polish squadrons and their unsurpassed gallantry, I hesitate to say that the outcome of the battle would have been the same." So,
had it not been for them Polish pilots in that squad, I hesitate to say the outcome of the battle would have been the same. Right? I want to say it. I want to say it defiantly, but there's hesitation because of what they did in the air. They got the highest score, highest amount of kills out of all the other squadrons against the Germans. They were the stars of the show. We reacted to them in a different video. Truly phenomenal.
The Polish pilots are winning hearts in Britain, but some of their countrymen are in a truly miserable situation. We've talked before about the Katyn massacre of 22,000 Polish officers, police, and intellectuals in 1940. But there are still approximately 2 million Polish men, women, and children being held in prisons and labor camps across the USSR. The British and the Polish government in exile in London reckon that between 100,000 and 250,000 could be suitable for military service. Sikorsky has been pressing the British to help him tap into that pool of manpower. The problem is that Joseph Stalin does not recognize Sikorsky's government in exile. All of this changes when Germany invades the Soviet Union and Stalin finds himself in alliance with the Poles. On July 30th, 1941, Sikorsky and the Soviet ambassador to Britain, Ivan Maisky, re-established relations. Their agreement grants amnesty to Polish citizens held in the USSR, from whom a Polish army can be established on Soviet territory. After much negotiating, the British and the Poles managed to ensure that this Polish army will be loyal solely to Sikorski's government. From there, things move slowly and painfully. Poles released from captivity make their way to recruitment camps northeast of Stalingrad. By November, these hold around 40,000 men and women. Sikorski chooses General Władysław Anders to command this army. He decides to move his forces to various military camps in the stans: Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan. Polish soldiers and civilians make arduous journeys from across the USSR. Kazimierz Smid is a Polish teenager who is separated from his family while traveling to Uzbekistan. The trains were totally unreliable. I can't begin to describe the absolute mess, confusion, and uncertainty that existed. At a place called Kuibyshev, my father and I left to find some food. And when we returned, the train had departed with my mother and younger sister. We tried to catch up, but this was an impossible task.
That's crazy. So unreliable train. It's an absolute crap show. Like, first all these Soviet men and women held in these all these Polish men and women held in these Soviet camps, and the government's like, we need to tap into this manpower. But the Soviets, they're like, no, like they were, I don't recognize your government. We're keeping them. They work for us, until the Germans threatened to invade Soviet, and then like, never mind, let's all work together to defeat them. And so they start releasing these 40 years old. So Stalin creates, I guess, a partnership with the Polish government that he didn't recognize before, but now that Germany's a threat to him, he absolutely recognizes. They release these men to go help fight against Germany. And the story of these two soldiers absolutely sucks, right? They get separated from their family because they go out to get food, and they come back, the train's departing with mom and sister, and they can't catch up. That absolutely stinks.
At this point, my father became ill and eventually died. I don't know where. I buried him and was on my own. What I did to survive, I would rather not talk about.
Wow.
The hunger was unbearable, and I would lie there thinking about what I would give for a piece of bread. Things aren't all that much better when the Poles arrive in Central Asia. The Soviets are only supplying rations for 44,000, even though Anders has 70,000 military personnel and tens of thousands of civilians by the spring of 1942. Hunger and sickness are rife, and the dead fill newly built Polish cemeteries. Anders wants to get his people out of the USSR. Not only are they dying before they even make it to the battlefield, but he also believes that the new German offensive, Fall Blau, will overrun the Soviet Union. But Sikorski wants to have Poles fighting on the Eastern Front alongside the Soviets. It's good for the alliance, keeping both Stalin and Churchill happy. In March, Anders manages to get permission from Stalin to evacuate 44,000 military personnel to the British part of occupied Iran. It helps that by now, Churchill wants extra manpower in North Africa and the Middle East. The first evacuation begins on March 24th, and Anders pushes his luck and evacuates 45,000 military personnel and over 25,000 civilians. It's a real slog of a journey, crossing Soviet Central Asia in trucks and railway cattle cars, and then by steamship over the Caspian Sea. The final destination is the Iranian port of Pahlavi. Adela Krasnopolska remembers the sea voyage. We left the Soviet Union, that inhuman land. We sailed through the Caspian Sea to Persia and Iraq. Some people on the ship died during the voyage, and their bodies were thrown into the sea. Anders receives permission to evacuate the rest of the Poles between July and September.
My days, they went through absolute torture, bro. Like, they suffered so much during this World War II. And I'd heard the stories, and we know about the Polish suffering and the hardship. But these civilians being bounced around, not starving to death, not having the food, the sickness getting to them. They just struggled. They struggled, and a lot of people couldn't make the journeys. And those who couldn't just died, got buried, thrown overseas. It's insane.
By the end, he's evacuated 114,500 people. 78,000 are servicemen and women. The rest are civilians. Once the Poles are in Iran, the British sort them into a fighting force. But again, the Poles find themselves in disagreement with an ally. Sikorsky wants an army of 2 corps, each of 2 divisions, plus a brigade of tanks, for a total of about 55,000 men. But after their ordeal, so many of the Poles are unfit for service that the British believe only a single corps of 2 infantry divisions and a brigade of tanks is possible. Churchill says he's been waiting for the Poles for 2 years, and he won't wait any longer for reinforcements. It's not just military disagreements either. News of the Katyn massacre emerges in April 1943, and the Polish government immediately calls for an independent Red Cross investigation. Churchill tries pushing them in the other direction, telling Sikorsky, "If they are dead, nothing you can do will bring them back." Sikorsky withdraws his demand for an investigation on the condition that the Anglo-Americans press Stalin to release more Poles held in the USSR. See, the Soviets have declared that hundreds of thousands of Poles are not covered by the amnesty, either for technical reasons or because they are under investigation by the Soviet state. But even though Sikorsky gives up his demand for a Red Cross investigation, the Soviets break off relations with the Polish government in exile on April 24th. This will have huge ramifications pretty soon. Back in the Middle East, Anders' army goes from Iran to Iraq and then Palestine. Here, they merge with the Carpathian Brigade in June. Backtracking just a little bit here, the Carpathian Brigade is made up of Poles who escaped Romania and Hungary into the Middle East. The brigade had been serving with the French in Syria at the time of the armistice in 1940. After this, they escaped to British Palestine. Composed of about 5,000 men, they fought well in North Africa alongside British and Commonwealth forces against the Axis. Since March 1942, they've been back in Palestine waiting for something to do. Anders' army and the
So it sounds like the soldiers that went to Hungary and Romania have like been kind of better off than the soldiers who went elsewhere. And they've been waiting like for action. They've been waiting for someone to come in, take control, and tell them what it is that they should be doing. Stalin has went back and I guess destroyed that relationship with the Poles. Churchill's like, you guys don't need to do an investigation. If people are dead, like you can't bring them back. What we need is we're waiting on the reserves. Or reinforcements. We're waiting on reinforcements, so we need to get them as quickly as possible. So everything's just kind of going to crap at this moment, it feels like.
Carpathian Brigade become the Polish Second Corps. Initially, it consists of 3 units. The Carpathian Brigade is expanded into the 3rd Carpathian Infantry Division. The 2 others are the 5th Kresowa Infantry Division and the 2nd Polish Armored Brigade. And that pretty much brings us to where we are now, December 1943, when the Carpathians start arriving in Italy. The rest of the Corps will follow early next year. The Poles will not see battle until March, and their baptism of fire will be in May at a place called Monte Cassino. Every step they take, though, is one closer to liberating their home, right? Well, not quite. Poland is in the middle of a tug of war between the Western powers and the Soviet Union. Remember how Stalin let Anders' army go? Well, he's been busy creating a replacement. You see, there are some, not many, but some Polish officers and men who didn't want to leave the Soviet Union. About 60 of the officers responded positively to Soviet ideals during their captivity. There are also still lots of Poles left scattered across the USSR. Back in May, one of those officers named Colonel Zygmunt Berling was chosen by Stalin to lead something called the 1st Tadeusz Kościuszko Infantry Division. The division is under the political control of the Union of Polish Patriots, an organization of Polish communists in the USSR. The soldiers took an oath of fidelity to the alliance with the Soviet Union and adherence to the Brotherhood of Arms of the Allied Red Army.
So some agreed. Now, did they agree because they truly agreed, or did they agree because if they didn't agree, then something bad was going to happen, is my question on that.
Polish government in London is enraged and sentences Berling to death in absentia. The division sees its first action at the Battle of Lenino. The Soviets aren't hugely successful at attracting Poles, though. I mean, 3/4 of its senior officers are Soviet citizens. But the force is growing, and by next year, it will be expanded into an army corps of about 80,000 men.
God.
Berling's
dang.
army really isn't representative of Poland, but they are pushing westward with the Red Army. Stalin has set up his own Soviet-friendly Polish government in exile, and his new military force will help him stake his claim to Poland. Anders' men have gone through hell to get where they are now.
Yeah.
Soon they'll be throwing themselves at the German defensive lines in Italy. They hope that the Western Allies will reward their service with a liberated Poland. But as the saying goes, possession is 9/10 of the law. Their sacrifice might be all for nothing if Stalin's men make it to Warsaw first. Only time will tell. If you'd like to learn more about the Katyn massacre, here's an episode from our War Against Humanity series from when it came to light. For more specials like this, well, for more content in general, join the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. That is what makes this possible. See you next time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We know the story of what happens next. The West freaking turns their back. After Poland helps them win the war, the West turns their back on Poland and sacrifices them to the Soviets and allows them to be under Soviet occupation, which is absolutely horrific and awful, and it's the absolute highest level of betrayal. But that's exactly what happened. You guys let me know if you enjoyed that. Please don't forget to smash subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and check out that next video. I'll see you guys next time.